The yacht rocked gently against the calm waves, its sleek surface gleaming under the bright sun. The laughter of the wealthy elite on board mingled with the soft hum of expensive conversation, but the atmosphere was far from relaxing. At the center of it all was Marcus Green, a successful black CEO known for his sharp business acumen and unapologetic attitude. He had earned his place in the world of luxury, yet today, the scent of privilege that filled the air would soon turn sour. As Marcus stood to speak with the host, a sharp voice interrupted, cold and cutting. "Sit down. You don't belong here," came the chilling words from the host's daughter, her eyes cold, filled with contempt. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder as the tension in the air thickened, every eye fixed on Marcus. Was this the breaking point? The tipping moment that would show the world just how deeply ingrained racial discrimination still was? You won't believe what happens next. Keep reading to see how this story unfolds. The yacht gently rocked with the rhythm of the sea, its sleek surface gleaming under the bright sun. Laughter echoed from the crowd of wealthy elites, mingling with the hum of shallow conversations. But Marcus Green, the successful black CEO at the center of it all, felt anything but relaxed. Despite his rise to power, the scent of privilege in the air seemed to hang over him like a storm cloud. As he stood up to speak to the host, a voice sliced through the murmurs, a sharp, dismissive tone from the host's daughter. "Sit down. You don't belong here," she snapped, her gaze icy and filled with disdain. The room went silent. The murmurs grew louder as the tension escalated, and every eye in the room turned toward Marcus. Was this the moment when the world would witness just how deep racial discrimination really ran? You won't believe what happens next. Keep reading to see how it all unfolds. Marcus stepped off the yacht, his shoes making a soft tapping sound against the wooden dock, a sound that seemed to echo in the empty space around him. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the water, but the warmth of the evening did nothing to soften the cold knot in his chest. As the boat's engines hummed in the distance, he took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The incident on the yacht wasn't just another instance of racial discrimination. It was a reminder, a painful slap in the face of everything he had worked for. It didn't matter that he was a successful CEO, in the eyes of people like the host's daughter, his accomplishments meant nothing. He was still just another black man trying to fit into a world that wasn't made for him. As he walked further down the dock, he could feel the eyes of the other yacht guests on him, some of them trying to avoid looking at him, others openly staring. He had grown used to this, the uncomfortable glances, the whispers behind his back. What hurt the most, however, was the sense of isolation. He had fought for years to make it to this level, to show the world that a black man could run a successful business, could belong in these elite circles, but in moments like this, it felt like everything had been for nothing. He had expected better from the host, someone he had known for years. They had shared countless business deals, exchanged compliments about their mutual success, but today, all of that was wiped away in a single, dismissive moment. Marcus clenched his jaw, pushing the bitterness down. It wasn't the first time he'd been treated this way, and it wouldn't be the last. The problem was, the more successful he became, the more it seemed to fuel the resentment of people who felt threatened by his presence. He had known the rules from the start: they would let you in, let you climb up the ladder, but the moment you reached too high, they'd find a way to knock you down. He could already imagine the conversation the host would have with his daughter later that evening, justifying her actions, making excuses for her behavior. It was always the same. "She didn't mean it like that," they would say. "You know how she is. It's not about race, it's just that she's uncomfortable." But Marcus knew better. He had seen it too many times to ignore it. The discomfort wasn't about a personality clash, it was about race, pure and simple. It was about the way people like the host's daughter saw him, never truly equal, always something other. As he reached the end of the dock, Marcus stopped and looked back toward the yacht. The party was still in full swing, laughter and clinking glasses filtering through the air, oblivious to the pain that had just unfolded. He wondered if any of them even noticed. Did they see him as just another black man with ambition, or did they see him as a threat? He wasn't sure which one stung more. With a sigh, Marcus turned away, pulling out his phone to call his driver. He didn't need to deal with the yacht crowd any longer, didn't need to try and make sense of the unspoken rules that governed their world. As he stepped into the waiting car, he stared out the window, the city skyline stretching ahead of him. He had come so far, but this moment made it feel like he was still standing at the starting line. The fight was far from over, and deep down, Marcus knew he couldn't stop now. He had too much to prove, not just to the people who doubted him, but to himself. Marcus sat in the back of the car, staring out the window at the city skyline as it blurred past. The familiar city lights seemed to mock him, the way they glittered so brightly from a distance, a world that seemed so far out of reach. He could feel the sting of the yacht incident still gnawing at him. He had played by the rules, climbed the corporate ladder with determination and skill, only to be reminded, yet again, that no matter how high he reached, he was always going to be seen as other. The moment the yacht had pulled away from the dock, he had expected the weight of the world to lift, but it had only grown heavier, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't push aside. It wasn't just about the insult or the blatant disregard for him as a person. It was about the fact that it wasn't even surprising. He had learned long ago that no matter how hard he worked, there were always people who would look at him with suspicion, with a deep-seated discomfort. The car slowed as it pulled up to the front of his penthouse. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror, but Marcus just nodded, signaling that he would take it from here. He stepped out of the car and made his way inside, the weight of the day pressing down on him. He was used to dealing with racism in the business world, but today had felt different. It had felt more personal, more deliberate. As he entered his apartment, he was greeted by the quiet emptiness that always seemed to fill the space when he returned home. It had been years since he had felt the presence of another person here, years since he had shared his life with someone else. The loneliness that came with his success was something he had come to accept, but nights like this made him question whether it was worth it. He set his keys on the counter and walked over to the window, staring out at the city below. His phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting his thoughts. He pulled it out, his heart sinking when he saw the name on the screen. It was the host, the one who had let his daughter humiliate him. Marcus hesitated before answering, not sure what excuse or justification the man would offer. "Marcus, I just wanted to call and apologize for what happened earlier. My daughter didn't mean any harm, she was just a little uncomfortable. You know how it is." Marcus clenched his jaw, the words hanging in the air like poison. "No, I don't know how it is," he replied, his voice steady but laced with a cold edge. "You don't get to brush it off like that. It wasn't a mistake, it was intentional." The host stammered, trying to explain, but Marcus wasn't interested in hearing it. "I don't need your apology. Just stay out of my way." With that, he hung up, his hand shaking slightly as he placed the phone back down. He walked over to his desk and sat down, running his hands through his hair. The frustration, the anger, the helplessness, it all threatened to overwhelm him. How many times did he have to prove himself? How many times did he have to endure this kind of treatment before the world would truly see him for what he was? A successful black man. No more, no less. Marcus stared at the city below, the lights twinkling like distant stars. He had worked too hard to let this kind of treatment break him, but it was getting harder. The longer he stayed in this world, the more it seemed like the walls were closing in. He had made it to the top, but now he wondered if it was all just an illusion, a brief moment of success in a system that would always try to keep him down. The days that followed were a blur for Marcus. He immersed himself in work, the hum of conference calls and the steady tapping of his keyboard drowning out the thoughts that still clung to his mind. Each day felt like a fight, a battle against a world that refused to see him as anything more than an outsider, no matter how successful he had become. His team noticed the shift in him, his quiet intensity, the way he seemed more distant than usual, but no one dared to ask. They knew better than to approach him when he was like this. Marcus kept his focus on the numbers, on the deals that needed to be signed, but in the back of his mind, the yacht incident still lingered. He couldn't shake the feeling of being dehumanized, of being reduced to nothing more than his race, as if his accomplishments were just a mask to hide the fact that he was never truly part of their world. Late one evening, after a long day of back-to-back meetings, Marcus found himself back at his apartment, standing in front of his window, staring at the city below. The skyline that had once inspired him now felt like a reminder of everything he was up against. His phone buzzed again, pulling him out of his thoughts. This time, it was a text message from his closest colleague, Sam. "Hey man, we still on for the dinner tomorrow?" it read. Marcus paused, his finger hovering over the screen. He had almost forgotten about the dinner. It had been scheduled before the yacht incident, but now, it felt like just another obligation he didn't want to face. He knew Sam meant well, but he wasn't sure if he could go through with another night of pretending everything was fine. But then, he remembered something. The dinner wasn't just about business. It was a chance to take control of the narrative, to show that he wouldn't let a single incident derail his progress. Marcus quickly typed a reply. "Yes, still on. Let's meet at 7. He set the phone down and took a deep breath. This was his chance. To take the power back, to show that he wouldn't let one small act of discrimination define him. He didn't need their approval, didn't need to be part of their world. He had his own world, one that he had built from the ground up, and he wasn't about to let anyone take that away from him. The next evening, Marcus walked into the restaurant with his head held high, his posture straight, his eyes sharp. Sam was already there, sitting at the table, scanning the menu. As Marcus approached, Sam looked up and smiled, his expression warm, welcoming. "Marcus, glad you could make it," he said, standing up to shake his hand. Marcus returned the handshake firmly. "Thanks for the invite, Sam," he replied, taking a seat across from him. The conversation flowed easily, business talk mixed with casual chatter, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different in the air. His mind kept drifting back to that moment on the yacht, to the look on the host's daughter's face, to the subtle, uncomfortable glances he had gotten from the others. But as he looked across the table at Sam, he realized that not everyone saw him the same way. Sam didn't see him as a black man trying to fit in. Sam saw him as Marcus, a businessman, a friend. And in that moment, for the first time in days, Marcus felt a sense of relief. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind him that not everyone judged him based on his race. Maybe it wasn't about the yacht or the people there. Maybe it was about finding the right people, the ones who saw him for who he truly was. As the night wore on, Marcus allowed himself to relax, to enjoy the dinner and the conversation. It wasn't the same as the superficial interactions he had on the yacht, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he could breathe a little easier. It wasn't a cure for everything, but it was a reminder that the world wasn't entirely against him. There were still people out there who saw him for what he was, a man with ambition, a man with integrity, a man who had earned his place at the table. The days after the dinner with Sam felt like a breath of fresh air for Marcus. For the first time in a while, he felt like he could actually breathe. He had stepped out of the suffocating world of the yacht and the elitism that had tried to define him, and found himself in the comfort of a true, authentic connection with someone who didn't view him through the lens of race or status. The conversation with Sam had been a reminder that there were still people who saw him for who he really was, not just as a black man trying to carve his place in a world that wasn't built for him. But that relief was short-lived. As much as Marcus wanted to hold on to that fleeting sense of peace, the reality of his situation started to creep back in. The world he had worked so hard to enter wasn't going to change overnight, and neither was the discrimination that came with it. It didn't help when he returned to the office the following day and received an email from the same host, apologizing once again for his daughter's behavior, but this time with an added note about how difficult it had been for them to understand Marcus's place in the business world. The words stung, as they always did, but Marcus didn't let them show. Instead, he responded politely, thanking the host for his apology, but making it clear that he was not interested in further interactions. He wasn't going to let this man, someone who was supposed to be his business ally, belittle him any further. It wasn't about the apology anymore. It was about the underlying message that no matter how successful he became, no matter how hard he worked, there were still people who would see him as inferior. The truth was, Marcus didn't need their approval. He didn't need their validation to keep going. But the fact that these people existed, the ones who felt entitled to judge him based on his race rather than his ability, was a bitter pill to swallow. He sat at his desk for a while, staring at the glowing screen, letting the frustration build up before shaking it off. There was no point in dwelling on what they thought. Marcus had learned long ago that the only opinion that truly mattered was his own. As the day wore on, Marcus's resolve grew stronger. He would prove them all wrong, not by stooping to their level, but by continuing to climb higher, to show that his success was not a fluke. He had earned every inch of it. That evening, Marcus attended another high-profile business event, one that had been scheduled months ago, long before the incident on the yacht. It was a gathering of influential CEOs and entrepreneurs, a place where connections were made and deals were brokered. Marcus had been invited to speak on a panel about the future of tech and innovation, a topic that was close to his heart. The crowd was different from the one on the yacht. These were people who respected his work, people who valued his insight. As he stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, Marcus felt a surge of confidence. This was his element, his world. He wasn't going to let anyone, not the host or his daughter, make him feel less than. He spoke passionately about the future of technology, about the role of diversity in driving innovation, and how companies could no longer afford to ignore the voices of those who had been marginalized. The audience listened intently, nodding in agreement. When he finished, the applause was genuine, warm, and loud. Marcus stood there for a moment, letting it sink in. This was why he fought so hard, why he had endured all the hardships and slights. This was his moment to shine, and no one could take that away from him. As he walked off the stage, his mind raced with the possibilities of what was to come. He had a long road ahead, but for the first time in a while, he felt hopeful. The battle wasn't over, but he was starting to win it, one step at a time. The days after the event felt like a turning point for Marcus. For the first time in a long while, he could feel the momentum shifting in his favor. The event had gone better than he had imagined, with people seeking him out for collaboration and offering praise for his insights. The applause was still ringing in his ears, and every successful interaction added fuel to the fire that had started to burn within him. He had entered that room unsure of his place, but now, he walked through his days with a new sense of purpose. He still couldn't forget the incident on the yacht, but now, it had taken on a new meaning. It wasn't a mark of shame, but a reminder of everything he had to overcome, and more importantly, everything he had already conquered. Yet even as he climbed higher, new challenges emerged. The world of corporate elites wasn't just about intellect or skill, it was about power, influence, and connections. Marcus had the first two, but he knew the third was crucial. That night, a new opportunity knocked on his door, or more accurately, his phone. It was an invitation to meet with a well-known venture capitalist, someone whose backing could propel his company into the next phase of growth. The meeting had been set up through an intermediary, a friend of a friend, and while Marcus was intrigued, he was also cautious. The venture capitalist was known for being ruthless, and the whispers around his name were never kind. Marcus had heard the stories, how he manipulated people, how he played the game with a cruel sense of strategy. But the potential for growth was too great to ignore. This was his chance to move forward, to show that he could succeed not just on his own terms, but within the system that had so often tried to break him. He dressed in his best suit, the one that made him feel like he could take on the world, and headed to the restaurant where the meeting would take place. As he entered, the dim lighting and the elegant decor reminded him of the kinds of places he used to be excluded from. But now, he belonged here. He walked to the table where the venture capitalist was sitting, a man in his mid-50s with a cold, calculating look in his eyes. The man stood and extended his hand, but Marcus didn't flinch. He shook the man's hand firmly, looking him in the eye, determined not to let anyone intimidate him anymore. They sat, and the conversation started with the usual pleasantries. Marcus listened intently, his mind focused, weighing every word that came out of the venture capitalist's mouth. There was a certain charm to the man, but it was the kind of charm that masked a more dangerous side. The man spoke about opportunities, about potential deals, but Marcus could tell there was a catch. There always was. It wasn't long before the man got to the point. "I like what you're doing," he said, leaning back in his chair, studying Marcus. "But to take your company to the next level, you're going to have to play the game. You're going to have to make compromises." Marcus knew exactly what that meant. The venture capitalist wasn't offering him a partnership, he was offering him a deal that would come with strings attached, a deal that would force Marcus to sacrifice his values in exchange for power. But Marcus was no fool. He'd come too far to sell himself out now. He kept his face neutral as he responded, "I'm not interested in compromising my principles. If that's the price of success, then I'll pass." The venture capitalist's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "You'll learn soon enough," he said, his tone icy. "Everyone has their price." Marcus stood up, his decision made. "Not me," he said, and with that, he turned and walked away, leaving the venture capitalist sitting there, stunned. As he left the restaurant, Marcus felt a surge of pride. It wasn't about the money, or the power, or the recognition. It was about maintaining his integrity in a world that often tried to strip it away. Marcus had learned that the only way to win was to stay true to who he was, no matter what the world expected of him. And as he walked out into the night, he knew that this was just another step in the journey. The road ahead was long, but he was more determined than ever to walk it with his head held high. Marcus walked through the streets of the city that night with a sense of purpose, the cool air brushing against his face, reminding him that the world could be both beautiful and brutal. He had just made a choice that many would see as reckless, turning down the venture capitalist's offer, which could have secured the future of his company. But in his heart, he knew it was the right decision. He didn't want to build his empire on compromises, not when they would cost him his soul. He had seen too many people get lost in the chase for success, willing to give up everything just to reach the top, only to realize too late that they had sacrificed what truly mattered. For Marcus, maintaining his integrity was non-negotiable, no matter the cost. As he passed familiar buildings, the weight of the decision began to settle in. He had done the right thing, but now, he faced the consequences. The corporate world was unforgiving, and walking away from a deal like that would undoubtedly make him a target. The venture capitalist wasn't the type of man to let a slight go unanswered, and Marcus knew the repercussions could be severe. But he wasn't afraid. If he had learned anything over the years, it was that fear could paralyze you, could stop you from taking the steps you needed to change the game. Fear was what kept people stuck in the same place, doing the same things, living the same lives. Marcus wasn't interested in that life. He had fought for too long to be where he was, to let fear control him now. As he entered his office the following morning, Marcus was met with the usual energy of the corporate grind. Phones ringing, employees typing away, the hum of business as usual. But there was something different in the air. The whispers were louder, the eyes a little more wary. It didn't take long for Marcus to realize that news of his meeting with the venture capitalist and his refusal had spread. The reactions were mixed. Some respected his decision, seeing it as a sign of strength, a man who refused to sell out for quick success. Others, however, saw it as a foolish move, one that could jeopardize his entire career. Marcus didn't let it get to him. He had faced worse. In the early days of his career, when he was just trying to get a foot in the door, he had been doubted by many, including people he had once respected. His skin color had always been a factor, whether people acknowledged it or not. It was a reality he couldn't escape, but it was one he had learned to navigate, using it as fuel to push himself harder, to work smarter. He had never let others define him, and he wasn't about to start now. The workday stretched on, but Marcus felt more focused than ever. The office had its usual chaotic rhythm, but his mind was locked in on the bigger picture. He was no longer playing by their rules. He was making his own. And as the day wore on, his phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. It was Sam, the same colleague who had been with him at dinner just days ago. "Marcus, we need to talk. I have a lead for you. Something big. Meet me at 4. Marcus frowned, wondering what this was all about. Sam had always been reliable, but this felt different. He wondered if Sam had heard about his meeting with the venture capitalist and what that might mean for him. Still, Marcus knew Sam wouldn't waste his time unless it was important. He set a reminder on his phone, the curiosity gnawing at him. What was this lead, and why was Sam so insistent? As the clock ticked closer to 4, Marcus found himself feeling a mix of anticipation and caution. Whatever Sam had to say, he knew it had the potential to change the course of his journey. He just hoped it was the right move. Walking to the conference room, Marcus prepared himself for whatever was coming. He had made his decision to remain true to himself, but now, the universe seemed to be testing him once again. As Marcus entered the conference room, his mind raced with questions. He had always trusted Sam, but this felt different. There was an urgency in Sam's text that made Marcus uneasy. He took a seat at the long glass table, his fingers tapping lightly against the surface as he waited. The room was quiet, save for the low hum of the air conditioning, but the tension was palpable. Sam walked in just as the clock hit 4, looking a little out of breath. He flashed Marcus a quick smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Marcus," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from him. "We need to talk." Marcus didn't waste any time. "What's going on, Sam?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. Sam leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table as he lowered his voice. "I've been hearing some things about the venture capitalist you turned down. Word on the street is, he's not happy. He's already talking to people, making calls, and let's just say it doesn't sound good for you." Marcus listened closely, his expression unreadable. He had expected some fallout, but hearing it out loud made the situation feel more real. "What kind of calls?" Marcus asked, his tone cautious but firm. Sam glanced around the room, ensuring no one was within earshot, before continuing. "He's got connections. A lot of them. People in high places, people with influence. And word is, he's not just going to let this slide. He's putting pressure on some of the people who've been backing you, trying to get them to back out of deals, to pull their support. If this keeps up, you could find yourself losing everything." Marcus's pulse quickened, but he didn't let his calm demeanor crack. He had known there would be consequences, but hearing the depth of the potential fallout was still unsettling. "I made my choice, Sam," Marcus said, his voice low but resolute. "I can't go back on that now." Sam nodded, understanding but still concerned. "I get it, Marcus. I do. But you need to know the kind of fight you're walking into. This isn't just about business anymore. This is personal. And people who are used to getting their way don't like being told no." Marcus took a deep breath, processing the weight of Sam's words. He had always known the path he was on wouldn't be easy, but this was a reminder of just how far-reaching the forces against him could be. The power dynamics at play weren't just about talent or hard work, they were about influence, control, and leverage. Marcus had always thought that his abilities alone would be enough to rise above, but now he realized that the game he was playing was much bigger than he had ever imagined. Sam paused for a moment, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. "But," Sam said finally, "I've got something that could help. I've been working behind the scenes, and I've got a lead on a new investor, someone who's looking to back the right kind of companies with vision, companies that break the mold. This could be your chance to really flip the script." Marcus leaned in, his interest piqued. "Who are they?" Sam hesitated for a moment, then spoke quietly, "A private investor. They don't usually do this kind of thing, but I've made some connections, and they've expressed interest. They like what you're doing, Marcus. They believe in you. But it's going to require a lot of trust on your part. This person isn't easy to get a hold of, and they don't like to work with just anyone." Marcus felt a surge of hope, but also a deep sense of caution. "How soon can we make contact?" he asked, already thinking about the steps he would need to take to move forward. "Soon," Sam replied. "But you need to be ready. This won't be like any other deal you've ever made." Marcus nodded slowly, his mind already shifting gears. He had been knocked down before, but he wasn't about to let anyone push him out of the game. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a while, he felt like he had a shot at something that could change everything. He wasn't going to let anyone take away what he had worked for. Not now. Not ever. Marcus spent the next few days in a whirlwind of meetings and research, the weight of Sam's words still fresh in his mind. The idea of a private investor was tantalizing, but Marcus knew better than to get his hopes up too quickly. He had learned the hard way that in the world he operated in, nothing came without strings attached. But Sam's assurance that this investor believed in him, that they saw the potential in his vision, sparked something inside him, something that had been missing since the incident on the yacht. He needed a breakthrough, something to prove to himself and the world that he wasn't just a product of his race or circumstance. He was a force, a visionary who could reshape the future. The days passed in a blur of phone calls, emails, and endless preparation. Marcus spent late nights in his office, poring over financials, projections, and possible scenarios. Every possible outcome played out in his mind, each one more challenging than the last, but he refused to be intimidated. He had already come this far, and he wasn't about to stop now. On the fourth day after his conversation with Sam, Marcus received a message that made his heart race. It was from Sam, confirming the details of the meeting with the investor. The meeting would be set up in 2 days, at a private location outside the city. It was all happening faster than Marcus had expected, and with it came a mix of excitement and anxiety. He had done everything he could to prepare, but there was still a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. Who was this investor, really? What did they want from him? And most importantly, was he ready to make the leap? The night before the meeting, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had brought him to this point. The yacht incident, the venture capitalist's rejection, the countless sacrifices he had made to get here, all of it seemed to come down to this one moment. He had worked tirelessly, but was it enough? Was he strong enough to face the challenges ahead? The next morning, he woke early, a quiet determination settling over him. He dressed in his best suit, the one that had seen him through his biggest moments. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, taking a deep breath, and trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in his head. Today could change everything. Or it could be another dead end. Either way, Marcus knew he had to give it everything he had. As he drove to the meeting, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. This wasn't just about securing an investment, it was about proving that he belonged. He had spent so long fighting for respect in a world that didn't always want to give it, and now, he was on the verge of something that could finally tip the scales in his favor. When he arrived at the location, a secluded mansion on the outskirts of the city, Marcus felt the tension building. It was quiet, almost eerie, the kind of place where deals were made in secret, where the stakes were high, and trust was hard to come by. He was ushered inside, where Sam was waiting for him, along with a few other individuals Marcus hadn't met yet. They all stood in sharp contrast to the lavish surroundings, dressed in dark suits and looking as if they belonged to a world far beyond Marcus's reach. He swallowed hard, but kept his composure. This was it. The moment of truth. Sam introduced him to the investor, a man in his mid-50s with an air of authority that was impossible to ignore. His handshake was firm, his gaze steady, but there was something cold about him, something calculating that made Marcus's gut tighten. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Marcus," the investor said, his voice smooth, but with an edge. "I've been following your work. Impressive. But we both know the real challenge is just beginning." Marcus nodded, his pulse quickening. The stakes had just been raised. This wasn't just a business transaction. This was a game, and Marcus knew he had to play it well if he wanted to survive. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves as he faced the investor. The cold, calculating gaze of the man made his skin prickle, but Marcus refused to show any signs of weakness. He had come this far, fought too hard to be intimidated now. This was a moment of truth, one that could change everything for him. The investor's office was grand, designed to impress, with expensive art lining the walls and plush leather chairs scattered around the room. Despite the lavish surroundings, Marcus felt like an outsider. But he wasn't here to feel comfortable, he was here to make a deal, and he wasn't going to let anyone or anything stop him. "Impressive," the investor continued, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. "But as you know, success in this world doesn't come easily. It takes more than just ambition and hard work. It takes the right connections, the right backing." Marcus nodded, his posture straight, his hands folded neatly on the table. He had heard this kind of talk before, from people who thought they could control the game by pulling the right strings. But he wasn't going to play by their rules. He didn't need to compromise his integrity to succeed. "I'm aware of that," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "But I've built my company from the ground up, and I didn't get here by relying on other people's power. I got here by believing in my vision and my ability to make things happen. The investor raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but not yet convinced. And what exactly is your vision? He asked, leaning forward slightly. Marcus took a moment before answering, his words deliberate. My vision is to build a company that not only thrives financially, but one that creates real change. Change in the industry, change in the way people see innovation. I want to break the mold, disrupt the status quo, and prove that success isn't about fitting into a system, it's about redefining it. The investor seemed to consider his words, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the edge of the desk. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment, the pressure to sell himself, to convince this man that he was worth the investment. But he wasn't just going to give in for the sake of a deal. If this investor wanted to back him, he would have to understand that Marcus was in control. I like your ambition, the investor finally said, breaking the silence. But you're asking for more than just money. You're asking for influence. You want me to put my name behind you, and that's not something I take lightly. If you want my support, you need to show me that you can navigate the challenges that come with it. There's a lot more at stake here than just the success of your company. Marcus sat back, feeling the weight of the man's words. He had heard this before, two people who wanted to test his resolve, who wanted to see if he was willing to sacrifice his values for the right connections. He wasn't. He couldn't be. He had worked too hard to get here, to build a reputation that was based on his integrity. I'm not asking for favors, Marcus said, his voice firm. I'm asking for an opportunity to prove myself on my own terms. If you can't support that, then maybe we're not the right fit. There was a long pause as the investor studied him. Marcus met his gaze head-on, refusing to back down. Finally, the investor smiled, though it was more of a thin, calculating smile than one of genuine approval. I respect your confidence, he said. But remember, in this world, confidence alone isn't enough. You need more than that. You need power. And power, my friend, comes with a price. Marcus didn't flinch, even as the words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. He had been warned about this, about the games people played, about the price of success. But he wasn't willing to pay it, not if it meant compromising who he was. I'm aware of the price, Marcus replied, standing up to leave. And I'm not interested in paying it. With that, he turned and walked out of the room, his head held high, his resolve stronger than ever. As he stepped into the elevator and descended to the lobby, Marcus knew that this was just one more battle in the ongoing war he was fighting. But for the first time, he felt like he was truly in control of his own fate. As Marcus walked out of the mansion and into the cool evening air, he felt a strange sense of liberation. The weight of the investor's words still lingered, but there was a clarity that came with the decision he had made. Turning down the deal hadn't been easy, but it had felt necessary. It wasn't just about money or power, it was about maintaining his integrity, about refusing to let anyone dictate the terms of his success. He had spent so long fighting for his place, for recognition, and he wasn't about to let that hard work be undermined by compromise. As he drove back to his office, the city skyline lit up before him, each towering building representing a piece of the world he had entered. The same world that had tried to box him in, to keep him in a corner where his worth was measured by his ability to conform. But now, Marcus saw the city through different eyes. He had never been one to bend to the pressures around him, but today he felt something shift. He wasn't just a part of this world, he was here to change it. The more he thought about the meeting, the more he realized that the investor's offer had been a test. Not just of his resolve, but of his vision. The investor had wanted to see if Marcus would sacrifice his principles for a shot at power, and Marcus had proven that he wouldn't. He wasn't looking for shortcuts, for easy wins. He was building something that would last, something that would stand on its own, not just because of who he knew or how much money he had, but because it was built on a foundation of authenticity and hard work. The next morning, as Marcus sat in his office, going over the numbers and projections for his company, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he knew that he was on the right path. He had made his decision, and there was no turning back. His phone buzzed with a text message from Sam, asking to meet later in the day. Marcus couldn't help but smile. Sam had been there for him from the beginning, through all the ups and downs, and despite the challenges, their friendship had remained one of the few constants in his life. The thought of seeing him now brought a sense of comfort. As the clock ticked closer to their meeting, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. He had started with nothing, faced countless obstacles, and endured more than his fair share of setbacks. But he had kept going, pushing through when others would have given up, standing firm in the face of adversity. And now, despite everything, he was still here. Stronger than ever. The meeting with Sam was a quiet one, held at a small cafe in the city. They sat down at a corner table, sipping coffee, and talking about the future. Sam had good news. He had secured a new partnership for Marcus, one that had the potential to take his company to the next level. The details were still being worked out, but the excitement in Sam's voice was palpable. Marcus felt a surge of hope. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be the breakthrough he had been waiting for. They spent hours talking, strategizing, and making plans for the future. As they parted ways later that evening, Marcus walked away with a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in a long time. The path ahead was still filled with challenges, but for the first time in a while, he felt ready to face them. He had made it this far, and he was determined to keep going, no matter what. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of meetings, decisions, and new opportunities. Marcus felt the weight of his choices more than ever, but there was also an undeniable sense of momentum behind him. The partnership Sam had secured for him was beginning to take shape, and the more he worked on it, the more he realized just how much potential it held. For the first time in a long time, Marcus allowed himself to think about the future with a sense of optimism. He had been through so much, faced so many obstacles, and yet here he was, standing tall and moving forward. The company was growing, and so was his confidence. He had learned the hard way that success didn't come without sacrifice, but he also knew that it was worth it. He had fought for every inch of his success, and now, he was in a position to build something lasting. But with success came new challenges. As the company expanded, so did the pressure to keep it running smoothly. Marcus found himself stretched thin, managing both the big picture and the day-to-day operations. There were always more decisions to be made, more deals to be negotiated, more problems to solve. Yet, through it all, he kept his focus on his vision. He wasn't just building a business, he was building a legacy, something that would outlast him and make a real difference in the world. One evening, as Marcus sat in his office long after everyone else had left, he received an unexpected call. It was from the venture capitalist he had turned down weeks ago. His stomach tightened as he answered the phone, wondering what this call could mean. "Marcus," the investor's voice came through, cool and businesslike. "I've been watching your progress, and I have to admit, I'm impressed. You've done more than I thought you could, and I've had to reconsider my position." Marcus listened carefully, trying to read between the lines. "What do you want?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. The investor paused for a moment. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it," he said finally. "I think we could work together. I see the potential in your company, and I think we could take it even further. But this time, I'm offering you the terms you wanted, no compromises. I'm ready to back you, Marcus. But it's on your terms." Marcus felt a surge of disbelief. It was a rare moment when someone offered him power without asking for control in return. He had turned this man down before, and now, he was offering everything he had wanted. But as he sat there, considering the offer, Marcus realized that things had changed. He no longer needed this investor's backing to succeed. He had built his company without their help, and he was stronger for it. "I appreciate the offer," Marcus said after a long pause. "But I don't need your money anymore. I'm doing just fine on my own." The words felt right as they left his mouth, and for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like he was truly free. He had built this company on his terms, and now, he was in control. The venture capitalist didn't reply immediately. And Marcus could hear the tension on the other end of the line. "You're making a mistake," the investor said finally, but Marcus didn't let it faze him. "No," he said, "I'm not. I'm just doing what's best for me and my company." And with that, he hung up, feeling a sense of finality settle over him. As he sat back in his chair, looking out over the city, Marcus realized something profound. Success wasn't just about reaching the top, it was about how you got there and who you became along the way. He had fought to be more than just a token in a system that wanted to keep him down, and now, he had built something that was entirely his own. He wasn't defined by the people who tried to hold him back, he defined himself. He had earned his place in this world, and no one could take that from him.